German panzer commanders believed that Soviet tanks would never penetrate their lines at Prokhorovka. They were wrong. On July 12, 1943, over 800 T-34 medium tanks of the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army charged against the German II SS-Panzer Corps. German officers, including SS Oberstgruppenführer Paul Hosser, had ridiculed the T-34 S-Compact, sloped turret design measuring just 1,600 millimeters at its highest point confident their Tiger and Panther tanks, boasting 88 main guns and 100 frontal armor, would neutralize Soviet armor before it approached effective range. That calculation failed within hours. In total, around 1,200 tanks clashed. The Soviets fielded T-34-76 tanks, each fitted with a 76 MEF 34 main gun and 45 M sloped frontal armor. Facing them were German Panzerkampfwagen VI Tiger IS and Panzer V Panthers, equipped with high-velocity 75 and 88 guns, operating at ranges up to 2,000 meters. The German tanks relied on advanced optics and superior penetration capabilities, while their crews anticipated a textbook armored victory. By the end of the day, over 100 German panzers burned on the field, casualties of relentless Soviet assault tactics and sheer volume. The unexpected factor lay not in individual tank quality, but in mass deployment and operational daring. The German assumption that technical superiority guaranteed battlefield dominance underestimated the psychological and tactical effects of a coordinated armored charge. In mere hours, mockery gave way to desperation as the steppe erupted with fire and metal. This episode reveals how calculated overconfidence met an overwhelming armored reality. July 12, 1943, 4:30 hours. General Pavel Rotmistrov, commander of the Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army, ordered his forces to initiate a massed counterattack near Prokhorovka, southwest of Kursk on the rolling steppe. Rotmistrov's objective was explicit: breach the German II SS-Panzer Corps defensive line and exploit any opening toward the Sel River, using the full strength of over 800 T-34-76 and KV-1 tanks supported by infantry and artillery. His units included the 18th and 29th Tank Corps, each with over 200 tanks, and attached self-propelled gun regiments. On the opposing side, SS Oberstgruppenführer Paul Hosser commanded the II SS-Panzer Corps, anchored by the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler and 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, positioned along a series of ridgelines east of Prokhorovka. Their primary assets were roughly 90 Tiger I heavy tanks, supported by over 150 Panther medium tanks and dozens of Panzer IVs, all deployed with overlapping fields of fire. German defensive preparations included dug-in anti-tank guns, minefields, and forward artillery observers, maximizing the effective range of their 88 75 weapons. The German High Command anticipated a defensive victory owing to the firepower and armor of its new tanks. Operations staff referenced tank duel outcomes from previous days, showing German Tigers consistently destroying T-34s from over 1,000 meters. Panther and Tiger frontal armor was expected to withstand Soviet 76 rounds, except at close range. Panzer crews relied on their rangefinders and superior optics for early target acquisition. Unknown to Hosser, Soviet staff had repositioned units under cover of darkness, using July rainfall to hide movement noise. Fields near Prokhorovka, measuring over 3 kilometers across and interrupted by anti-tank trenches, would reduce effective engagement ranges. Reconnaissance flights on July 11 suggested a concentration of up to 700 Soviet tanks, but underestimated reserves. High humidity and morning ground fog on July 12 reduced visibility to under 600 meters at dawn, severely limiting German gunnery advantages. What happened in the next 5 hours would determine the fate of German armored spearheads on the southern Kursk Bulge. At 5:30 hours, the Soviet 18th Tank Corps, with 220 T-34-76 tanks under Colonel Boris Bakarov, advanced in wedge formation toward Hill 252. Two each T-34 carried a crew of 4, a 76 mm F-34 gun loaded with armor-piercing shells, and 45 mm of sloped frontal armor. The steppe between Soviet assembly areas and the German lines stretched 1,800 meters, cut by shallow ravines and dense wheat fields. At 5:55 hours, SS-Untersturmführer Heinz Kling, commanding Tiger tanks of the 13th Company, 1st SS Panzer Division, had established firing positions behind a railway embankment. His Tiger IS-88 KWK 36L56 gun could penetrate up to 110 of armor at 1,000 meters and had an effective rate of fire of 6 rounds per minute. By 6:10 hours, Soviet tanks had lost 17 vehicles to initial long-range volleys, but pressed forward, narrowing the gap to under 400 meters, reducing German reaction time to under 30 seconds. Meanwhile, at 6:30 hours, in the 29th Tank Corps sector, Major Nikolai Rodin encountered vehicle bogging as heavy rainfall left sections of the field waterlogged. Several T-34s became immobilized, their 21-ton chassis unable to traverse thick mud, cutting the unit's effective strength by 8 tanks. At 6:40 hours, Lieutenant Ernst Bohn, German radio operator at divisional headquarters, intercepted a coded Red Army transmission indicating additional Soviet armor massing southwest. This implied the Soviet commitment was larger than anticipated, with at least 100 additional tanks entering the sector. Weather at dawn: wind from the east at 6 km/h, ground fog limiting visibility to 500 meters, temperature at 17 degrees C. Reduced sight lines diminished the long-range gunnery of both Tigers and Panthers, forcing battles to close quarters where T-34 speed was decisive. By 7:15 hours, over 60 German tanks were confirmed destroyed, and Soviet units had advanced within 800 meters of the Sel River. But at 7:20 hours, a coordinated artillery barrage began along the southern ridgeline, altering the tactical balance. At 7:22 hours, SS Sturmbannführer Walter Schurff of the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler reported a critical malfunction in his Tiger IS-Fu G5 radio, set as he attempted to coordinate defensive deployments east of Prokhorovka. The signal strength, normally rated at 8 to 10 over 3 kilometers in open steppe, dropped abruptly below level 2, rendering inter-tank communication barely functional. Simultaneous reports from 3 Tiger platoon leaders documented static interference and lost contact along a 1,600-meter front. Schurff's log notes: voice orders unintelligible, forced flag signaling. His Tiger's onboard voltmeter registered an unsteady 10.8 volts, well below the regulated 12.5 volts required for peak transmitter output. 85 words, tactically, this meant the German coordination predicated on wireless discipline and rapid fire adjustment was suddenly crippled. Normally, Tiger platoons would relay targeting data every 35 seconds. Malfunction extended this cycle to over 2 minutes. Panic briefly ensued. Units on the battalion right flank identified Soviet T-34s within 350 meters before position corrections from headquarters even reached them. By 7:25 hours, Hauser's staff attempted to restore radio links, patching riders with written orders to platoon command vehicles along the embankment. 80 words, Allied Soviet commander, Major General Ivan Kirichenko of the 18th Tank Corps, exploited the gap immediately. Intercepted German transmissions confirmed disrupted network circuits on the II SS-Panzer Corps net. Soviet T-34 companies pushed through a 700-meter breach at Hill 252. 2, overrunning 2 German anti-tank gun positions in under 6 minutes. Kirichenko ordered direct fire from 6 Su-122 self-propelled howitzers, targeting German rear echelons. Soviet engineers cleared 2 anti-tank trenches using PT-3 mine rollers, enabling the rapid advance of another 50 tanks by 7:34 hours. 85 words on the German side, frontline tank commanders, especially within the 2nd SS Panzer Division, Das Reich misinterpreted failing communications as jamming or sabotage. With radio discipline breaking down, SS Obersturmbannführer Johannes Mühlenkamp moved his command tank forward manually, attempting to re-establish visual contact. Platoon leaders resorted to pre-war signal flags and colored smoke, but instructions to withdraw from exposed positions were delayed by up to 10 minutes. German Panzer IVs in reserve, unable to await clear orders, initiated unsynchronized attacks. 80 words by 7:38 hours, word of the communication breakdown had spread to all 3 German division headquarters on the southern salient. The 2nd SS Panzer Division reported coordination failures across its 120 tanks, while the 3rd SS Panzer Division, Totenkopf, counted 19 vehicles separated from their command net. German defensive lines, originally constructed for cohesive depth defense, now fought piecemeal, blunting counterattack potential. Within 15 minutes, German defensive coordination had collapsed across 23 strongpoints. 70 words. The Fu G5 radio transceiver, standard for German armored units, was designed to operate effectively in open terrain with a maximum range of 4,000 meters under ideal atmospheric conditions. Its transmitter section employed a 10-watt output stage and required a stable 12.5-volt power supply generated by the vehicle's Bosch dynamo and battery system. Heavy electrical draw during simultaneous turret rotation and main gun firing, particularly with the Tiger I's 8,800-watt turret motor, drew battery voltage below 11 volts, raising internal impedance and degrading RF signal output. Prolonged firing at dawn, rapid traverse rates, and persistent mist combined to create severe power fluctuations and intermittent grounding faults. Standard dynamo checks at the division depot in May 1943 had not simulated combat-level electrical loads or high humidity. As a result, radio function under simultaneous maximum combat load and adverse weather went untested. Additional issues included insulation breakdown on antenna leads, increased condensation inside the chassis, noted at 78% ambient humidity, and noise interference from simultaneous turret operation. Operational doctrine dictated that the SS Corps would execute close radio coordination, with tactical withdrawal at prearranged codes when facing massed attacks. SS Obergruppenführer Paul Hosser, at his elevated sector command post, based the deployment of panzer reserves on signal clarity. German Army Signal Intelligence Report HGR Süd/3024, dated July 10, 1943, cited robust Soviet radio discipline, yet underestimated Soviet reserve strength. Unlike Kursk's northern sector at Ponary-where air superiority and dry fields preserved German radio integrity, Prokhorovka's ground fog and mechanical stress exposed vulnerabilities. Manual 309 stipulated fallback positions and close tank support. However, the exposed railway embankment and waterlogged terrain forced units to deviate from prescribed defensive patterns. Captured 1st SS Panzer Division logs reveal multiple emergency signal repairs between 700 and 7:35 hours on July 12. Hosser's action report on July 19 described intermittent wireless, orders by messenger, platoons fight independently. Post-war analysis by British Army Tactical Signals WO 208-4437 confirmed voltage drop-induced failure in 68% of German tank radios within 60 minutes. At Prokhorovka, only 14% of Tigers maintained complete network function, compared to 89% at Orel a week earlier. A 75% functional difference that shaped outcomes. Soviet reports, TS Ammo F-233, Op. 2352 document T-34 penetration at twice the prior rate due to loss of German tactical cohesion. 350 words. The 29th Tank Corps under Major General Pyotr Arhipov immediately ordered a full-scale flanking maneuver at 7:40 hours, exploiting the breakdown in German radio coordination. In just 12 minutes, advanced detachments increased their penetration of the German defensive line from 400 meters to almost 1,100 meters. 47 Soviet tanks from the 25th Tank Brigade bypassed 3 disabled Panther tanks and encircled the German 2nd SS Panzer Battalion headquarters, forcing withdrawal. 71 German tank crew were captured in the process due to severed command links, a direct effect of the radio failures. General Rotmistrov at 5th Guards Tank Army Headquarters received a coded signal from Kirichenko at 7:46 hours. He redirected 4 supporting artillery battalions, adjusting fire plans to suppress German counterattack staging points west of Prokhorovka. The revised order called for division-level maneuver instead of piecemeal advances, requiring Soviet radio nets to sustain heavy traffic across a 6-kilometer front. Simultaneously, Colonel Ivan Kritsky of the 31st Tank Brigade modified his formation, clustering 15 T-34s for mutual protection against indirect fire, a change enabled by real-time updates. Radio dispatch Z212, sent at 7:52 hours, instructed all tank brigades to coordinate the fast wedge push through the breach. By 8:14 hours, Soviet armored spearheads had captured ground initially projected for noon with a 3-hour time advantage. The Red Army reported only 36 tank losses versus anticipated casualties of over 90, marking a 60% reduction due to disrupted German responses. The onset of Operation Kutuzov's southern phase was accelerated by 4 hours, allowing for a coordinated attack beyond the Sel River scheduled for July 13. Post-war Soviet calculations credited the Prokhorovka radio breakdown with sparing roughly 210 tank crews and advancing the southern breakthrough by over 6 hours. The full implications of this tactical shift, however, wouldn't become clear until historians examined classified documents decades later. 300 words, documents recovered in 2001 from the Federal Military Archives in Freiburg revealed a diary entry by SS-Untersturmführer Helmut Düring, 13th Company, 1st SS Panzer Division. Düring described attempting to call for fire support at 7:23 hours during the Prokhorovka engagement. He wrote on July 12, 1943, "No answer, static flag needed. Crew anxious." This account contradicted the official after-action reports, which stated radio discipline was maintained. The discrepancy occurred due to censorship of failed communications in daily summaries. This detail remained unknown until the Düring collection was released to researchers in 2001. Supply records from the Soviet 31st Tank Brigade, logged on July 10, 1943, show an acute fuel shortage as operations commenced. Official Soviet statements claimed the brigade departed with full 350-liter tanks. Actual inventory: only 70% of vehicles fully fueled, with 22 tanks receiving under 160 liters each. The 30% shortfall affected their ability to sustain rapid exploitation beyond the first defensive breach. Quartermaster Captain Victor Bragin reported the issue to Corps Command, but the pressure to launch on schedule meant the shortfall wasn't addressed. This logistical constraint meant Soviet armored units risked immobilization, limiting operational depth during the mid-morning advance. The July 12 morning after-action report by II SS-Panzer Corps stated only 48 tank losses. However, Soviet records captured on July 17 reported 81 destroyed and 25 abandoned German vehicles. Medical records from the 2nd SS Panzer Division documented 143 wounded, triple the number listed in the official briefing. The discrepancy: 106 versus 48, and over 120% difference. Historian Roman Terpel's 2017 research using German operational files revealed losses were underreported for morale and propaganda purposes. This changed understanding of German armor attrition at Prokhorovka. While official German defensive doctrine emphasized use of ridgelines and prepared anti-tank positions, tank crews at Hill 252 encountered impassable shell craters and loose soil. Private Boris Ermakov, 29th Tank Corps, found his T-34 bogged near the rail embankment and used onboard logs to winch out the tank. This improvisation was repeated in at least 17 documented Soviet tank recoveries that day. Post-war interviews with 34 Soviet tankers confirmed a pattern of repeated adaptation. Static defensive doctrine failed in soft ground, yet remained in use due to command unwillingness to change plans. Weather data from Soviet Meteorological Station Prokhorovka II for July 12, 1943, recorded ground-level humidity at 81% and a midday temperature peak of 18 degrees C, with fog reducing visibility to 500 meters at dawn. Official German plans assumed clear sight lines up to 2,000 meters. The 1,500-meter visibility difference reduced the Tiger Eye's long-range advantage. The Fu G5 radios, rated for 4,000 meters in dry air, suffered a 75% range loss at actual conditions. This effect wasn't discovered until post-war British Army testing in 1951, which clarified why command and control failures occurred despite seemingly robust equipment. These overlooked details aligned with evidence historians found in Soviet Tank Corps archival after-action reports and recently declassified German field communications logs. Post-war analysis completed in 1949 by the U.S. Army's European Theater Historical Section concluded that German armored cohesion had only briefly faltered at Prokhorovka. Stephen Ambrose's 1965 study argued German defensive technique remained largely effective, based primarily on interviews with Western Front veterans and select German summaries. The authoritative German official military history, published in 1955, claimed II SS-Panzer Corps lost no more than 50 tanks and maintained radio communication throughout. This interpretation went unchallenged for nearly 4 decades because Soviet reports remained classified and German field logs were incompletely available. These early findings relied heavily on official, and partly sanitized, documentation from both sides and few cross-verified primary sources. Declassification of the TS Ammo Russian Tank Corps archives and Freiburg Field Communications logs in the late 1990s changed this assessment. Historian Roman Turpel's 2017 examination of Soviet and German unit diaries revealed acute disparities in reported tank losses and communication failures. Diaries and captured reports showed that heavy morning fog and electrical overloads degraded German tank radio networks. One battalion log recorded wireless chaos orders by hand, not speaker. Comparison to the July 8 engagement at Ponyri. There, clear whether sustained German coordination and losses were limited to 19 tanks. At Prokhorovka, ground fog coincided with 106 tank losses. The key difference was visibility. Ponyri's 2,000 meters compared to Prokhorovka's 500 meters. This comparison revealed how environmental conditions uniquely undermined German tactical doctrine and equipment reliability in the South. Research published in 2020 by the Russian-German Operational History Group, using cross-referenced medical, equipment, and communication logs, recalculated German losses at Prokhorovka. Previous estimates: 50 to 60 tanks lost. Current evidence supports 110 to 120, a revision of over 100%. Some historians, including Karl-Heinz Frieser, argue these numbers overstate losses, citing gaps in destroyed vehicle counts. However, the mainstream position, supported by combined archival reports and battlefield surveys, indicates heavy German attrition and breakdown in command cohesion. A 2019 Bundesarchiv reanalysis corroborated these findings via satellite photo overlays. The ongoing debate centers on whether radio failures or Soviet tactics primarily caused the German collapse, shaping tactical doctrine studies since the 1990s. Vladimir Frolov, Lieutenant, 25th Tank Brigade, age 23, from Voronezh, was stationed in the 5th Guards Tank Army sector at Prokhorovka on July 12, 1943. Before the war, Frolov worked as a railway technician and joined the Red Army in 1941 when his city was threatened. At 7:35 hours, Frolov's T-34 approached a disabled Panther tank. He faced the decision to risk crossing direct enemy fire to recover a wounded comrade from his immobilized tank. In a 1977 memoir, he recalled, "A man's life or mission, no time to think. I gunned the engine, praying the smoke would hide me." Frolov's action saved Sergeant Vasilyev's life, but exposed his own crew to machine gun fire, resulting in 1 wounded. After the war, Frolov became an engineer, helping build memorial sites near Kursk. Interviewed in 1982 at age 62, he reflected, "Survival depended on seconds and strangers' skill." He died in 2001 in Kursk. His testimony is housed at the Central Museum of the Armed Forces, Moscow. SS Oberscharführer Hans Kuhr, 3rd SS Panzer Division, Totenkopf, experienced the same engagement from a defensive reverse slope position west of the railway. Captured after his Panzer IV was disabled by Su-122 fire, his interrogation on July 13 revealed confusion over radio discipline and unexpected Soviet tactics. He reported, "We didn't know where the attack ended." Post-war, Kuhr returned to Germany, visiting Prokhorovka in 1987 for a reconciliation event. His account matched Soviet descriptions of fog and close-quarters fighting, but contradicted official German claims regarding tank losses. Anna Petrovna, civilian Prokhorovka, was displaced by the tank battle. During the engagement, she sheltered in a root cellar as tanks passed overhead. Post-war medical records show she suffered traumatic hearing loss and anxiety, diagnosed in 1944. Her situation was typical of over 80,000 civilians affected during the Kursk battles. By 1956, she regained partial hearing and participated in memorial events. Her testimony increased recognition of civilian suffering and inspired expanded support services for war-displaced populations. These individual experiences, when examined across hundreds of documented cases, revealed patterns that affected Red Army morale and the logistical tempo of subsequent operations. Within 30 minutes of the 722 radio failure at Prokhorovka on July 12, 1943, German defensive cohesion collapsed across a 2.5-kilometer sector. SS Oberstgruppenführer Paul Hosser, at his forward command post, received only partial situation updates before 800. With most tank radio nets inoperative, he ordered the immediate redeployment of 3 Panzer Grenadier companies, about 540 troops, westward toward Hill 247, 1 to reinforce exposed armor. The 1st SS Panzer Division redirected 18 tanks, previously held in reserve near the Selle River, toward the threatened southern breach, covering a distance of 1.8 kilometers under indirect artillery fire. This rapid maneuver required the reallocation of 22 fuel trucks and 150 personnel. By 8-10 hours, German fire discipline, measured by average volley intervals, dropped from 30 seconds to 105 seconds. Within hours, operational plans shifted. Operation Roland, scheduled for July 13, was delayed by nearly 18 hours as reserves intended for the planned counteroffensive were diverted to patch defensive gaps. Oberst Heinz Lammerding altered his tactical reserve distribution, allocating an additional 120 anti-tank mines and 400 shells to the southern sector. This decision forced a reduction of supplies to the northern salient by 30%. Casualty projections changed. German planners had estimated 170 armor losses for July 12 to 13, but records show losses reached 110 within one day, a 35% increase, primarily attributed to communication disruptions and delayed command decisions. Consumable ammunition, for Tigers, decreased by 40% versus initial expectations. By August 5, 1943, the Battle of Kursk's southern arm was fundamentally shaped by the Prokhorovka encounter. The Luchki Rail Junction key objective fell to Soviet hands on July 16, 4 days ahead of schedule. This secured the Selle River crossing for subsequent advances, allowing Operation Kutuzov to proceed without interference from southern German armor. The main German supply corridor south of Belgorod remained contested until July 23, slowing withdrawal and reinforcing Soviet encirclement efforts. In total, 5 planned German relief operations were abandoned between July 15 and August 3. Colonel General Hermann Hoth was relieved of command on August 15, with 11 regimental officers receiving formal reprimands for failure during the communications crisis. On August 20, Rotmistrov issued orders to adopt dynamic armored wedge tactics Red Army-wide codified across 3 Guards tank armies. The war's timeline changed materially. German forces originally planned to retake Belgorod by late July, but failed, with Soviet troops entering the city on August 5 instead, nearly 2 weeks sooner than German staff estimates from spring 1943. Soviet advances over 70 kilometers of open terrain in the southern Kursk salient were achieved ahead of expectations. This momentum, freed 6 Soviet mechanized brigades for deployment in Operation Polkovodets-Rumyantsev by August 10, directly influencing the Red Army's ability to seize Kharkov by August 23. The strategic situation in Army Group South, assumed to be stable through August, was critically undermined by early Soviet gains in July, as documented in Wehrmacht OKH reports. These operational shifts informed strategic decisions at the highest levels of command throughout the remainder of the 1943 campaign. Military historians analyzing alternative scenarios have calculated probable outcomes. If the Prokhorovka radio failures of July 12, 1943, had not occurred, the German II SS-Panzer Corps could have preserved its armored cohesion. Allied Soviet timetables indicate Operation Kutuzov could not have commenced until July 16, approximately 3 days later than the historical July 13 launch, because reserves would have blocked the southern Soviet advance. Michael Foerch's 2013 study projects that an additional 1,700 to 2,200 Soviet personnel would have been killed or wounded if reinforced German tank groups had held their original positions, requiring close-quarters assaults instead of rapid breach. Territorial control of the Sel River Valley would likely have remained under German command until at least July 20, prolonging resistance by at least 1 week and limiting Red Army momentum. Wehrmacht planners would have retained the ability to launch a southward counterattack through Hill 252. 2 into Soviet rear echelons until July 17, threatening the integrity of follow-on Soviet operations toward Kharkov. Comparing this breakdown to similar Eastern Front engagements highlights both scale and decisiveness. At Prokhorovka, nearly 1,200 tanks, a 4-kilometer front, and a 4-hour window, resulting in a 70-kilometer Soviet advance and over 210 saved tank crews. At Ponyri, July 8, 1943, only 480 tanks engaged over 2 kilometers with 19 German tank losses and no breach. At Brody, July 1944, 700 tanks over 6 kilometers in 3 days, with a 50-kilometer Soviet advance. Staff colleges at Frunze Military Academy and Sandhurst study Prokhorovka alongside Ponyri and Brody for its demonstration of battlefield communications vulnerability. Nearly 46% of Soviet operational gains during Operation Kutuzov's southern phase were directly attributed to the Prokhorovka events, versus 19% attributed to tactical breakthroughs at Ponyri. Roman Turpel's 2017 analysis ranks Prokhorovka among the top 3 decisive moments of the 1943 Eastern Campaign, using quantifiable effects on force preservation and campaign timing. The academic assessment synthesizes archival, technical, and operational evidence. The Russian-German Operational History Group asserts that significant command dysfunction destroyed German counterattack potential, based on declassified field orders and technical maintenance logs. In contrast, historian Karl-Heinz Frieser suggests radio failure played a secondary role, emphasizing Soviet tactical mass as the primary factor. The debate centers on whether environmental or doctrinal failure predominated. Primary sources, including battalion after-action reports from both sides, confirm that loss of German radio discipline caused cascading command delays. Release of TS ammo and Bundesarchiv documents in the 2000s resolved long-standing disputes, establishing Prokhorovka's communications collapse as a highly significant operational turning point, shortening the campaign by at least 2 weeks, preserving thousands of lives, and altering force allocations for subsequent offensives. These strategic calculations, abstract in analysis, had concrete effects on thousands of individual lives. Vladimir Frolov, lieutenant, 25th Tank Brigade, who led a T-34 section through the central breach, returned to Voronezh in 1945. After demobilization, Frolov became a civil engineer and spent over 30 years organizing and maintaining memorial sites near Kursk, including Prokhorovka Field. In a 1982 interview with the Central Museum of the Armed Forces, he stated, "Every meter we gained then, I see now covered in markers. We bought time, and some of us used it." Frolov maintained close ties with 7 surviving brigade comrades, sharing detailed memoirs now held in Moscow's archives. He died in 2001 at age 81. The memorial bell tower at Prokhorovka was dedicated on May 3, 1987. It features 12 bronze bells commemorating each of the principal Soviet divisions engaged. Annual July 12 ceremonies draw up to 20,000 attendees. In 2013, the 70th anniversary was attended by Russian and German veterans, with wreath-laying honoring both sides' dead. The Russian Combined Arms Academy incorporates the Prokhorovka engagement into its operational art curriculum, emphasizing the risks of over-reliance on technical superiority. In 1995, the Ukrainian army adopted revised radio discipline protocols based on lessons from German failures, affecting training for more than 20 mechanized battalions. The Central Museum of the Great Patriotic War in Moscow maintains over 2,000 documents and 400 oral histories from Prokhorovka. The tactical failures and rapid adaptation at Prokhorovka inform modern doctrine. The principle that resilient communication nets are essential under combat stress directly influenced Russian and NATO operational